Mr Speaker, the Sugray report was published this morning, and I look forward to discussing that during this afternoon's statement with the Prime Minister. For now, I want to focus on the cost of living affecting the whole country. Mr Speaker, since we stood here last week and I asked the Prime Minister yet again to back Labour's plans for a windfall tax to reduce energy bills, hundreds of millions of pounds have been added to bills of families across the country, and hundreds of millions of pounds have landed in the bank accounts of energy companies. It sounds like he's finally seen sense, and the inevitable U-turn may finally have arrived. So when can people across the country expect him to use those oil and gas profits to bring down their bills?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, there's nothing original about a Labour plan to tax business. There's nothing remarkable. They want to tax business the whole time, every day. Labour wants to put up taxes on business. And what we're doing is we're helping people. He asks when we're going to help people. We're helping people now, Mr Speaker. And we're putting £22 billion into people's pockets already, cutting council tax by £150, cutting fuel duty, cutting national insurance contributions by an average of £330 for people who pay NICs. And, Mr Speaker, how can we afford that? Because we have a strong economy, because we came out of COVID fast, Mr Speaker, which would not have been possible if we'd listened to the party opposite.
15 tax rises, and he pretends they're a low-tax government. It's been, Mr Speaker, it's been 4.5 months since Labour first called for a windfall tax on oil and gas profits. I've raised it week in, week out, and every week he has a new reason for not doing it. The Business Secretary said it's bad. The Justice Secretary called it disastrous. Even this weekend, the Health Secretary and the Northern Ireland Secretary opposed it. He ordered all of his MPs to vote against it last week. And now, surprise, surprise, he's backing it. Prime Minister, I'm told that hindsight is a wonderful thing. But, Mr Speaker, whilst he dithered and delayed, households across the country suffered when they didn't need to. What?
Peter. Mr Bone, a man who always wants to catch my eye is not going the best way to do so. Keir Starmer.
Mr Speaker, whilst he dithered and delayed, households across the country suffered when they didn't need to. What is it about the Sugray report that first attracted him to a U-turn this week?
Prime Minister, Mr Speaker, there is no surprise about Labour's lust. There's no surprise about Labour's lust to put up taxes. There's nothing original about his thought. They get off on it. They absolutely love to confiscate other people's assets. What we prefer to do, Mr Speaker, is make sure that we have the measures that are in place to drive investment in our country and drive jobs. And it's thanks to the steps that we took, thanks to the fact that we came out of COVID faster than any other European country, which would not have been possible if we'd listened to him, that we now have unemployment at the listen to this. They used to care about this, Mr Speaker. Unemployment at the lowest level since 1974. And, put that in your pipe.
Keir Starmer.
Mr Speaker, I actually thought with this U-turn he might actually get his head out of the sand, but obviously not. The reality is that every day of his dithering and his delay, £53 million has been added to Britain's household bills. Whilst he's distracted trying to save his own job, the country has been counting the cost. But complacency is nothing new for this government. Back in October, the Chancellor delivered a mini-budget that has to be reread to be believed. With inflation already climbing, he said that he understood people were concerned about it and the government was ready to act. Since then, inflation has risen to a 40-year high, the highest rate of any G7 country. If the government was so ready to act 6 months ago, why hasn't it?
But, Mr. Speaker, the government has acted, and my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, continues to act. This is the government that we not only put in the living wage, Mr. Speaker, it was a Conservative institution, but we've now raised it by a record amount. We've raised it by £1,000, Mr. Speaker, a record amount. We've helped families on universal credit have another £1,000, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the measures, the £9.1 billion we've already put in to support people's costs of heating. We're abating the costs of fuel for people up and down the country. And of course, we're going to do more, Mr. Speaker. We're going to put our arms around the people of this country, just as we did throughout the COVID pandemic. But the reason we can do that is because we took the tough decisions to drive the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, which wouldn't have been possible if you listened to him, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we have, and let me take another statistic, youth unemployment, they used to care about it, youth unemployment at or near a record low.
Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just the Chancellor back in September. The Prime Minister called fears about inflation unfounded. He was the last person to spot the cost of living crisis, just as he's the last person to back Labour's plan to help people through it. And, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just on inflation that they got it badly wrong. In the same speech, the Chancellor boasted about growth. The Prime Minister does today. How we were going to do better than all our major competitors. It was obvious that he was being complacent. And lo and behold, Britain is set to have the lowest growth of any major country except Russia. Despite our brilliant businesses and all we have to offer, why has his government inflicted on Britain the twin-headed hydra of the highest inflation and the lowest growth?